Hello and welcome to another video. Today's one's a little bit special. It's come from a request from a subscriber. If you do have any requests, just drop me a line and I'll see what I can do for you. But this one is the Orsett Hall in Orsett in Thurrock, Essex. So when one of my subscribers, Dylan, asked me if I have any history or any ghost history of Orsett Hall, which is situated just outside sort of Grays and Stanford-le-Hope in Thurrock, I was like, oh, actually, yeah, I do. And it's quite a strange history, and there's some quite a dark history attached to it. There's not really a lot of public knowledge about it. So Orsett Hall is set in about 12 acres of landscape gardens. It was built in the 17th century and was later updated in the 1750s by Richard Baker. And then later on it transferred into the hands of Whitmore family, who, as we know in Orsett, we've got the Whitmore Arms. They were quite a famous family in the area during that time. And it went under quite a lot of changes. And I guess one of the major ones was in, I think it was 2007, there was a fire and the whole building was completely destroyed. But it was recreated almost identical to what it was like. This goes some way to answer one of the questions I get quite a lot. Is it a building that's haunted or the land that it sits on? I can say that since that building has been rebuilt, there's still been a lot of ghost activity around that area of the new building. And it is sort of designed on the same floor plan and the outside looks quite identical. I do not know much about the inside of it, but I'm guessing it's sort of based around the same sort of like a Victorian, very sort of plush and posh era of decoration inside. So yes, there is quite a lot of activity going on there, and we'll get into it now. So if you ever go to Orsett, it's a very lovely village. There's some lovely cottages and some local pubs, one of them being the Whitmore Arms. I think it's still called the Whitmore Arms. I'll check that, but I'm sure it still is, or it always has been since I've known it. And it's generally a very, very quiet village. And back in the 1700s, it wasn't much different. I mean, it has expanded since, but back then again, when we've still got the village jail that is still sitting there on the village green in Orsett. So one of our first written evidence we have of a paranormal or ghost event in Orsett Hall happened in 1825, which is quite some time to start documenting ghosts and paranormal stuff. But this was regarding the death of a stable hand on the estate at the time. Now when I say the estate, it didn't actually transform into a manor house until a lot later on. But with that amount of acreage of land, you know, I'm guessing there were stables and maybe some sort of farm animals on there at that time. I will hands up here, I do not know all my history on Orsett. I'm very much Stanford, Corringham, Fobbing, Mucking when it comes to history, bit of Grays. When it comes to Orsett, I don't know everything. So it's taken me a little bit of researching as well when I was doing this before. I did go there under Thurrock Paranormal, but we didn't do an investigation there. And the reason being that is they actually burnt down before we got to do it. And it took some years for it to be rebuilt. So this event that happened in 1825 was actually, say, the murder of a stable hand. Now we say murder, he was actually found hanging in the barn, one of the barns at the front of the building as you entered into the acreage. It was reported that the owner of the building at the time had come down to find out why some work hadn't been done, and he found the gentleman hanging from one of the rafters in the barn. But what was unusual at this time is that there's no way the gentleman could have actually got up there. So what they believed that someone may have attacked him, and while he was laying on the floor, throw a rope over the rafter and hoisted him up while he was still alive. They actually ended him because the other end of the rope was tied off and there's nothing underneath, there's no ladders underneath or anything like that. But at the time, it's like he was put down as a murder. I can't see any, we don't have any other documents on it. So I'll take their word for it, it was a murder. But what we do know is that that ghost or that gentleman's soul is still said to haunt that area of the entrance of Orsett Hall. As you enter the Orsett Hall via the 128, as you turn around, there's a bit of a wavy bend as you go around. Now that stable hand is said to have been seen walking across that little pathway leading into the entrance. Got a photo here. It looks very nice at the moment. It's got all fairy lights and all that there. Doesn't look very creepy at all. But for people that see this stable hand walking across there, now again, it is said that this mainly happens on a misty evening. Now, you know my thoughts with mist and fog going across roads. They can often make shapes that people think are ghosts. But what they don't do is knock on car windows or stand in front of car headlights, which are some of the reports that we have of this stable hand. So one gentleman recently was driving into the Orsett Hall. When he sees someone walking across the road, he slammed on his brakes. It was quite a foggy night. He slammed on his brakes and the gentleman just stood there and looked at him, and he noticed that he was wearing sort of like an old, more like a flashy shirt. There's like ruffled collars and that sort of weird sort of dress. And again, that's quite a weird dress for the stable hand as well. But as I say, we don't know much details about the stable hand. Was it a member of the family that done this, or was it a part of his uniform that he had to wear around the estate? But this gentleman stood there in front of the car, and he said he had like a standoff. You know, they were both looking at each other and staring each other's eyes. And the driver's thinking, mate, are you gonna go? And as he sort of motioned to the person standing in front of the car, he disappeared. So again, we've had quite a few little stories like that over, I say, mainly since I started Fuck Paranormal, which was about 20 odd years ago now. Orsett Hall has been one of these locations where we get quite a lot of little ghost events, little ghost stories like that. And then we have some bigger ones. I mean, we've got another report from I'll check that, hold on. Right, we've got another report from 1895 that actually links up with some of the other reports of the area. Now, this is a group of Roman soldiers walking over the fields from Orsett Hall. Now, this links up with reports we have of Roman soldiers being seen over Walton Hall Farm and going down to East Tilbury and even Coalhouse Fault. Now, you can almost draw a straight line from that goes from like the 128 down through that area, making a slight diversion of fields, missing ditches and things like that. It would have been a common sense straight line for a Roman army to walk down. So Walton Hall, we have reports of Roman soldiers walking across the field, and we do know that we have something down there we call the triangular field, where Roman and even Saxon artifacts have been found by metal detectors. One of the reasons why I had a metal detecting club down at one point. But also it links in with the report of Coalhouse Fault, where we had soldiers seen from waist high. So obviously the ground has built up and these soldiers could only seen from waist upwards, where their bodies would have been under the ground and they would not be visible to modern day, I guess. But these Roman soldiers at Orsett Hall have repeatedly been seen after that date. So in 1895, when we have our first report of it, but we also have it in 1914, just before the outbreak of World War I. Now I'm going to jump backwards and forwards in the timeline of Orsett Hall, because it had the fire and being rebuilt. What we have is sort of different sets of paranormal or haunting events that sort of do link up but may not be quite linking up. So we're going to jump a little bit ahead or back from where we were from 2007 to 1989. So it's still quite modern, quite recent, but I guess it's when we think of what we'd call our first spooky ghost story. Now this was, by that time, the hall had been transformed into a function suite where people could actually get married and hold big events. And what we have is a report from a lady who was actually down in the area on a business event that was taking place in one of the function suites at Orsett Hall. And the company had booked out quite a lot of the rooms there for their staff and other guests. This lady, she'd come down, they booked her in, they showed her room. And again, lovely room, everything you could want. It was very, very posh, very, very nice, and everything seemed absolutely lovely and wonderful. She went down for a dinner around about 7 o'clock in the evening, and she met up with some of her friends, and they're saying, "Oh, isn't it a lovely place? So beautiful around here." And they walked around the gardens around the outside, again commenting on how lovely the place was. They sat at the front and they'd had a few drinks, and then the lady decided it was time to go to bed. She wished her friends good night and went up into her bedroom. She had a wash, set up, got into bed. Very, very comfortable bed. She said she fell asleep as quick as anything. And then she got woken up around about 1 o'clock in the morning by what she thought was like a bit of a pulling on the covers of her bed, and she couldn't make much fun. She's fighting the covers, trying to put them back on, and she felt as if someone kept pulling them off of her again. And then she sort of like realised that she wasn't at home, it wasn't her husband pulling the covers off of her, and she sat up quite sharply, and there's no one around, no one in the room. She put the bed light on, and again the room was empty, but she could hear a very faint sobbing sound. And she got out of bed and she opened up her door and she looked down the corridor. There's no one down the corridor, and she could still hear this sobbing sound. And she walks around the bedroom and she thinks it's coming from her bathroom. And she walks into the bathroom, and it's, you know, slight, just very, very slightly louder in her bathroom than it was in the bedroom. But again, it's only very, very faint. And she thought, well, perhaps it's like the person next door. So she went back out and sneaked along where the other rooms were, listened again, she couldn't hear nothing. She went back into her room, and again she could hear this faint sobbing sound. Eventually she put it down to maybe it was someone below her that was crying, and she thought, well, I've got to go back to bed, I need some sleep. She got back into bed, and she'd only been asleep, she reckons about 4 or 5 minutes, where she felt somebody sit down quite dramatically on the end of her bed. And she sat up, and on the edge of the bed was this lady sitting in a green evening dress, crying and sobbing into a really, what she said, a very ornate decorated handkerchief, and just crying and sobbing. And she turned around and she's going, why did it happen? Why did it happen to me? And the lady is sitting there in bed, she's just paralysed. She says she could not move. And she's thinking, is this a dream? Am I dreaming this? And what she did, she kicks her legs out, and so all the covers flew up on the bed, and as they come back down again, the ghost, or the lady in the green evening gown, had disappeared. And she's like, was that my imagination? But she felt that on the bed, and she's like, I did not imagine that. I did not imagine that was real. And what she did, she said that there's no way she was going to stay in that room on her own anymore. So she got her bits together, she went down and she knocked one of her friends up and said, I'm losing it, I'm really scared, something really creepy's happened, and can I just come and sort of sleep in your room with you tonight? And the lady's like, yeah, that's fine, absolutely fine. So the next day at the conference that was taking place down below in the rest of the Orsett Hall, her friends were taking the mickey out of her and poking fun at her that the word has spread very, very quickly that she thought she'd seen a ghost in her room that night. And she's saying, well, if you're brave enough, you come stay in there and I'll have your room. But none of them took her up on her offer. And so that evening, she's sort of like, things don't seem as scary during the daytime. So she sort of like got her confidence back and thought, no, what? I don't know, perhaps it was a dream. I've got to spend one more night there. How bad can things really be? And I'll have a few extra drinks, it'll just knock me out and I'll wake up in the morning. Again, what she'd done, very much like the night before, they all sat outside, had a few drinks, but this time a lot of the conversation was around ghosts, and they spoke to some of the staff around there, and the staff didn't really help because the staff were passing on their own little ghost stories that had happened in the area, people they'd seen walking across the grounds, or things that happened in the kitchen, or cutlery moving or jumping around. They didn't really help the mood of this lady, so already she was feeling very uneasy going back to bed. But nevertheless, the evening had come to an end and she went back upstairs, and she's tentatively getting ready and put all the lights on. She put all the lights on and she goes, I'm not going to actually turn the lights off tonight, I'm going to sleep with all the lights on. So it got a bit later, and by that time she again was ready for bed. She lay down in the bed, and again the lights were on. Now remember, the lights were on. It took her a lot longer to fall asleep because the lights were on, and because she was pooing herself, thinking that a ghost could pop up at any time. But eventually she did fall asleep. But again, not for long. So she woke up around about 2 AM this time. And again, it was this sobbing noise, but all the lights in the room had been turned off. And that freaked her out straight away. And she'd promised her friends that, no, I'm going to stay there all night. And she didn't be ridiculed by her friends anymore. So she made sure she stayed in the room. I don't know if I would have done that, not if I was on my own. Yeah, I don't think I'd been brave enough to sit there on my own at that time of night, knowing what I'd seen the night before and what the people in the staff had told me. I think I would have bottled it and gone down to the other rooms. But she thought, I'm going to ignore it. I'm just going to put my hands over my ears. I'm going to put a pillow on my head and just pretend it's not happening. She was lying there trying to get back to sleep for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And the only thing that was really happening was having the pillow over her head was making her really sweat. So she took the pillow off and put it back under her head and just laid there. The weeping noise had actually disappeared. The sobbing sound couldn't be heard anymore. And she thought, it's probably just my mind playing tricks on me. And she think, actually, you know what, I need to go wee. She got up and she walked into the toilet, and standing right in front of the mirror was the lady in the green evening gown, crying. And she said she looked at her, she had a very, very pale face, and her makeup was like smudged all down her face, and she had sort of like a fat lip, sort of like cuts and sores all across her lip. And she turned around and she was still saying, why me? Why me? Why did it happen to me? This was the last thing the lady seen in the room. She ran out screaming down to her friend's room. And unfortunately, that is the only bit of information we have on that. We don't know what it links to. We don't know where this lady has come from. I don't have any other information on, did a lady die in that room, or was she someone from the family? We do not know what she was referring to. Why me? It is interesting to say about the lips. Maybe it was some sort of disease that she had caught. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe she was attacked by somebody, maybe a partner. We do not know. But she sort of described her as sort of like a very Victorian looking lady. So I guess we're sort of going back to around those sort of years. But again, we don't have any other reports of her as such, but something similar happened later on once the building has been redone after the fire. But we'll come to that a little bit later. Our next story brings us a little bit more up to date, not by much, but it's actually 1994. And this is by a staff member who had worked there quite a few years, that had started seeing something that she couldn't quite explain, and she's the only one who could actually see what was going on. Had been working there quite a few years and was quite used to the uneasiness of some of the atmosphere that could be found around the building. So this staff member was in charge of setting things up for weddings, and it was coming up to a big wedding, and she said, well, the lady would like all flowers outside the entrance of the hall as she walks in. And she's fine, yep. So the florist turned up and she's setting all the flowers up outside. And it was a lovely sunny day, and she looked across the entrance over the field or the garden area where there was a massive great big tree. And she thought that she sees somebody laying down by the tree, and by her mind, none actually turned up there or should be there at that time. And she started walking over, and it's sort of like, as she moved down the stairs, the shape disappeared from the floor. And she was like, put it off to nothing. She'd carried on getting everything ready, and as she walked back up the steps to go in through the main doors, she just turned round, and again she see what she thought was somebody laying down, sort of prone in a arms out spread position on the ground by the big tree. And she thought, no, there's definitely somebody there. So she went over there, and again, by the time she got there was nothing down on the floor. And she's thinking, well, hot day, maybe it's like the heat waves come off the grass and making me see sort of things that are not there. And she just put it down to that. And she carried on and nothing happened. the next day or the next day. But then one evening, she was getting the hall ready for a function, a dinner function. And she was just inside the main entrance where she could see outwards. And she just see this, what she said was like a little boy run across the grass in front of her and across the pathway towards the main building. And at the time she thought, oh, there must be young guests coming as well. And she just carried on doing her stuff and everything. And then she heard a giggling, and the giggling was right behind her. And she turned around and there was no one there. And then she's gone back into the kitchen area, and again she could hear this giggling, and it was as if someone was following her. And she turned around, it keeps looking around, and there's no one there. And then she goes over to, it was like a cabinet where I'm not 100% sure what was inside the cabinet, but it's obviously items that she had to get out for the tables. And she bent down. She says she bent down, she felt someone right next to her ear giggle really loudly. A child giggled in her ear. A child giggled in her. A child giggled in her hip. A child giggled in her. A child giggled in her ear. A child giggled. A child giggled in her. A child giggled in her ear. A child giggled in her ear really, really loudly. It frightened the life out of her. It frightened the life out of her, and she dropped where she was getting out of the cabinet. And that made one of the other staff members turn around and go, "Are you okay?" She went, who was that? Who's just, I keep hearing a little boy giggling and running around. And they're going, there's no one here. There's no one coming here. Me and you are the only people in this room at the moment. And of course, by now she's like, no, I definitely heard this little boy who was giggling. And she's got her stuff together, gone back out, and she's quite shaken up by this now. And as she's walking towards the main entrance with this stuff in her arms, the little boy is standing right at the front doors, looking straight at her, and laughs, and then turns and runs off towards the tree. This shook her up, and she turned around and she said to her friend what she'd just seen and what had been going on. And her friend poo-pooed it, but one of the other managers there turned around and said to her, "Oh, well, someone else said something about that, and as far as we know, it's the ghost of a little boy who fell out the tree and died. And it was like a long time ago, centuries ago." And she's like, "Really? Why no one else seen him? Why is it only me?" And he goes, "Oh, he only goes after people he likes, that he bonds with and has a friendship with." Over the next few weeks, she didn't see anything like that at all. And it weren't until they had another big function, and again it was an evening function, where she was getting her stuff from the kitchen, and as she was bending down again, she could hear the giggling again, but in the distance. And straight this time she was like, "I'm going to go and look. I'm going to try and track this giggling down now." And as she went back out again, she see the boy standing at the doorway, and she followed the boy out, and he run over towards the tree, and he hid round the tree, and then she see him trying to sort of shimmy up the tree, and then he disappeared. Now, unfortunately, she tried to tell other people around there, and no one actually believed her. It wasn't until sort of the internet and all that come about that she relayed her story to other people. And lucky enough, other people come forward and said, "Actually, yeah, we do remember her saying that at that time." So they sort of like vouched for her. That it wasn't something she just come up with later on. It was actually, she was saying it at the time that it was actually happening, and asked people to see if, could you hear this? Could you hear it? So again, for me, that adds a bit of credibility to an event that has happened, and then it's been relayed again many years later by the same person, but with other people verbally backing up to me, and also written backing up to me and to other people. I now know that that has been relayed to other staff that have worked there over the years since then, and this ghost child is quite a common sighting around now. I don't know if that's now because people are more in tune with the image of a little boy haunting a place, or unfortunately a lot of myths do spark up. Once a ghost story is known in an area, you do get I guess sympathy sightings or people that just want to be able to say they see something. Our next report comes from 2001, and it's probably the most well-known ghost story or ghost event that happened at Orsett Hall, because it went quite wide, and at the time the internet was, most people were getting onto it and spreading stuff around, and communication became a lot easier. And this one is, I guess, quite a simple basic one for ghosts and paranormal stuff. And it was two staff, young staff, were working in the kitchens, where some pots and pans kept flying off the side of the unit. But this was happening quite regular, and they managed to bring other people in and got them to see these pans on the side of the unit sort of just slide off. Now again, I'm not an expert in washing up, but I do know that sometimes the air bubbles underneath stuff can make it slide off. But these were apparently flipping over and coming off the side of the unit. Now this is quite well known in the area, purely because there's quite a lot of young staff there, and a lot of young staff see it and witnessed it, and it was happening quite often. And a lot of them were still going to college, and that was their Saturday jobs or evening jobs, and the rumour just went round about these things that happened. So it's become quite well known that in their kitchen now these things would happen, but also that they'd often think they'd have a really strong smell of smoke in the kitchen area. I think there's fires going on, but there wasn't. There was never any problems. Then obviously in 2007, a fire did break out in that kitchen that managed to burn the whole of the building down to the ground, to absolute rubble. And that is when it was rebuilt. Quite interestingly, that those pots and pans apparently do sometimes still flip off the side of the new kitchen. So is it the same entity or ghost that is still playing tricks on the staff there that was before it got burnt down? I say, but that is up to, I guess, you as the viewers and that to make up your own minds about that sort of stuff. Again, I do know some people can explain this with pressure and bubbles and air, and it did get quite well known around our local area that these events were happening in Orsett Hall. Now, because that happened in 2001, we did start getting a bit of a spike in reports of other stuff in Orsett Hall, and this included things like the coach, the horse and coach that meant to pull in of a late at night, and people hear it and hear the horse, but there's none ever around. And again, it does link back. There was stables there, and like there was horse-drawn carriages would have come in and out there all that time in the history. I'm not ruling out that people can hear that. You know, I'm a bit of a believer in the imprint of time, that people can hear things from past times under the right conditions, the stone tape theory and stuff like that, and certain conditions can make things replay. I do think there's more credence in that than the ghost side of it all. I guess that's more paranormal. Again, paranormal is only for things that are beyond our understanding at the moment and how many senses we have. But these sort of things did increase after that first widely known ghost tale. The other one is quite an interesting one, because it comes into that realm of, is a building haunted or is the land haunted? Now this is back in 2005, and we have a husband and wife who were getting married, and there's their honeymoon. Now I'm not 100% sure about how the house was rebuilt inside once the fire happened, but those in their honeymoon suite. And I'm not going into great details, but about 3 AM they started settling back down for the evening, and they had a great evening, a fantastic wedding, loved the day. And now earlier on I said about the lady in the green evening dress. As they was laying there that night, they could hear sobbing, and they again thought maybe it was a guest crying or something like that. And the sobbing was getting quite loud. The husband got up and looked around and couldn't find anything. And then the lights in the room that were all off turned on, and so it made them jump. And the wife was like, oh, I don't like this, it's a bit creepy. And she grabs hold of her husband, who she thought was standing next to her. And it wasn't her husband. And it was a gentleman that she said looked very old, very grey, very drawn in the face. And as soon as she grabbed hold of him and looked, he disappeared. And that completely freaked her out. What we can look at is that sobbing we heard in the first event linked to this? Is that man the one who's upset the other person that has made her cry? But obviously the lady, the bride, was very upset, very traumatized by this. Her husband come over, tried to calm her down, going, what did you see, what did you see? And she explained to him what had just happened, that as the lights flicked on and made her jump, she grabbed him, who she thought was him, and looked up and see this man standing there. And her husband sort of like, what are you on? What are you taking? Didn't believe it at all, unfortunately for her. And she freaked out and she's going, look, believe me, this has just happened. Both settled down to try and get back to sleep, but they couldn't. That would make them like really alert again. And so her husband was like, I'm gonna have a cup of tea. He got up and started making a cup of tea. And again, the lights started flickering. And the wife sort of like, I don't like this, this is creepy, I want to go. He's like, no, we paid a lot of money for this place, we're staying here tonight. And I've had too much drink, you've had too much drink, we've got nowhere to go, we've got to stay here. She's like, I'm going to go sit in the garden and wait till the morning. And she didn't, she sat there and they made a cup of tea and they're sitting there drinking this tea. They could hear the sobbing again. And this time the husband's going, I actually think it's in this room. I think it's somewhere around here, but I can't quite put my finger on where this sobbing's coming from. And at that time, he started smelling like a really musky smell, but he said it had sort of like a sagey smell to it. And he couldn't put his finger on what that smell was. He said there was just something not right. It was a sort of like a sagey sort of smell that he couldn't quite put his finger on, but it was the closest thing he could come up to. The smell was sort of like drift in and drift out, and again, so would the sobbing sound. And they still weren't sure, could it be someone else outside or something else was going on? And as they sat there, they was calming themselves down, the conversation had changed to something completely different, and they were getting a bit more tired, and they started thinking, well, we'll go back to bed. And it was actually starting to get a little bit light outside. And as they were settling down, she got up, went loo, come back down. As she was about to get back in the bed, she felt as if something had just grabbed her foot or touched her foot. And she jumped, freaked out, jumped onto bed. And her husband was going, no, you probably just touched something. It might have been the bedstead or something like that. She's going, no, something touched me. He's got up, looked around, no, nothing now. But every time that she tried to go to sleep, and every time he went to sleep, well, he didn't tell her that night, but every time he was trying to get to sleep, he said he could see a shadow standing in the corner of the room, watching them. But as it got lighter and lighter, the shadow of this person faded. But he didn't pass it on to his wife in case it freaked her out even more. Bring this up to date, after, well, not up to date at all really, but after the building was rebuilt, a wedding party were staying at that hotel when, again, someone in the honeymoon room reported hearing sobbing in that room, and again reported seeing someone standing in the corner of the room. Now, what I don't know is if that room is the same location as the honeymoon room originally was. After the fire destroyed it, did they rebuild that? Now, if anyone is watching this who knows about Orsett Hall and knows about the configurations of the room, let me know, because if that is correct and these people don't know each other and there's no link, they didn't know each other's stories, it's quite interesting that we've got almost an identical story from after the fire to before the fire in the same room, or maybe near enough the same room. I'm not saying it has to be exactly identical square footage, but it would be quite interesting. Again, it goes to explain, can ghosts haunt a building or is it the land? I know in the Bella's story that we had, where the ghost was seen sort of floating up in midair where the floors of the building would once be. And of course the building's not there no longer, but the ghost is still in midair haunting the area. Now, again, if you have any questions or if you have any ideas, just drop me a note on to YouTube in the comments below. Also, I'm going to tag some other videos in here that I know some of you have been asking for. But again, please, if you've enjoyed the video, give me a like, give me a subscription, and hit the bell to remind you of when I upload a new video. And I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.